I just wanted to talk about longevity in the NBA and kind of regression in star players and just aging in the NBA in general. I think guys like LeBron, Durant, and even Chris Paul to a lesser extent have kind of spoiled us with their play and just longevity. Like KD's played 17 seasons, LeBron's in season 22, Chris Paul's in his 20th season, and that's just not a realistic standard to hold players to. Like the average NBA player has a career length of about 4.8 years. However, this number can obviously vary depending on an abundance of factors. Like I kind of deduce it to skill level, injuries, team needs, behavior, etc. Like there's a lot of different factors that go into it. Now, human research, role players or fringe players tend to have shorter careers, so somewhere around 2 to 4 years. And then star players or, high level contributors often extend their careers into the double digits. So 10 plus years, we're talking those extended guys. And much of that longevity, in my opinion, depends on these three traits. The first one is adaptability. For example, being able to transition into a bench role. Now, for this trait, I kind of point to guys like Carmelo Anthony versus Andre Iguodala. Like they were close, and when they were drafted, they were about a year apart. And Andre Iguodala, like especially with the Warriors, he was able to move into the bench role pretty gracefully and just contribute at a lesser level, but just more as a six man versus a starter. And then even as he bounced around the league, like from he went to the Heat or the Grizzlies, like and then back to the Warriors, like he moved around a bit, but he also was always able to find a role in a place within a winning setting. Versus Carmelo Anthony, which I think when he was first moved to the bench, I don't think he was a bench player, but I also don't think he handled things well. Like with the Thunder and then moving to the Blazers and the Rockets, and that's kind of why he ended up out of the league because there was a little difficulty behind that as things were reported. Like we obviously don't know, we weren't there on the teams, but just as things were being reported, and then by adaptability, I think also being able to extend your range. So from going, like, especially as the league continues to inch further and further away from the basket, like, think a guy like Al Horford. He could always shoot earlier in his career. Like, he'd shoot a lot of middies. He was great in the post, and he was a great player. But he didn't really take as many threes. But as he's aged, he's become a great shooter. He's expanded his range, and I think that's also added to his longevity. Like, he's still in shape and able to play and defend and rebound, just do all the things he needs to do. But I think adding that 3-point shot just added more value to his game and just added to him as a player. And you're not having to, bang in the post as much or play down low, and it takes miles off your body. Now, this goes great with my next point, with my next trait, health. A guy like LeBron, knock on wood, has never had any serious injuries like a ACL or Achilles, and even some guy like named KD, he has had some serious injuries. But it's not likely. Like most 99% of the population is not Kevin Durant. Like you're not just going to come back better after an injury like that. And on the LeBron front, I think this is just a testament to his training, preparation, and towards his body, but also his genetics. Like he's just built insane. Like he just a freak of nature, one of a kind athlete, and nobody wants to be injured. And guys that can avoid it are just better off. Like if you, for an example, you think guys like Embiid or Derrick Rose are constantly banged up, they don't typically last as long because as you get older, injuries get worse and worse. It's harder to return from, and they take a larger toll on your body. Like I don't think Embiid will be playing 10 years from now. Well, I don't know. He'd be like 40 by then, anyways. But I think like he has about 3-4 years left if he continues on this rate of getting injured, and that's okay. Now, for my last trait, I think maintaining a skill set that fits teams' needs. Like shooters typically are able to play longer careers because it's less strain on your body when you're not a guy like let's say Russell Westbrook, like playing at the rim, that takes more toll on your body versus, a guy like Klay Thompson, who I'm going to talk about in a second. But also think guys like who had long careers, like Kyle Korver, JJ Redick, like guys like that are able to play longer because one, you always need shooting. Two, you don't really ever lose your shooting ability. Like you might lose the ability to create space, but or create your own shot, but then you just become a catch and shoot player, which both of them were. And then you never really lose it. Like I was just saying, like athleticism. So for this example, I said, think a guy like Klay Thompson versus John Wall. They were drafted, I think, in the same, either a year apart in the same draft class. Like for all my examples, I was trying to use guys who are similar in age, but Klay Thompson, even after his injuries, his game still translates really well because he's a great shooter, one of the best of all time, a top 5 shooter who also can still play a little bit of defense. Versus John Wall, like he has so many injuries, they just took a toll on his body, and he wasn't the same athlete or player. And that's kind of what his game was predicated around, his athleticism, being able to be, he was like the fastest guy in the league for a couple of years. And injuries kind of, when your body starts to break down, you lose some of that athletic ability, and then your game just doesn't always translate the same. And shooters are just always going to be valuable because 3-point shooting and spacing is one of the most important things in today's game, especially if you can play on both sides. But 3 and D players are a whole special category of player. And then also smaller players, as far as like maintaining that skill set that fits teams' needs. Smaller players also don't typically play as long because you can be picked on defensively, which is why I think a guy like Chris Paul still being able to play and start at this point in his career is remarkable and just a testament. Like he's one of one. He's like, there's also obviously been other small guards that have played a long time, like John Stockton, but it's rare, is what I'm trying to say. And even as far as like maintaining a skill set, even star players like LeBron has had to adapt over time to play this long. Like with the Lakers, he's not as much of a lead ball handler. Like he's more of a screen setter, a typical power forward. Like he rolls, he plays out of the post. Obviously, he still has the ball in his hands when necessary, and he could still contribute as a playmaker, as a point forward. But that's not the only thing he does. Like back when he was in Cleveland, like in the apex peak of his prime, like he'd have the ball every single possession. Everything was dictated by him, and that's why I think a guy like LeBron needs to be marveled more. And this is back to my the topic I was talking about at the beginning with Stephen A. kind of downplaying his dunk. And just why are we celebrate everything he does at 40? Because like it's stuff that you're seeing. I don't think we'll ever see another player, at least in my lifetime, with this type of longevity. Like no major injuries, the IQ, the shooting, like the adaptive shooting, and the will to keep playing. There's a bunch of other factors, but I just it's not something. It's not normal. It's not something you see every day, which is why people still get. Obviously, people are fans of LeBron, but it's why it's so celebrated when he does stuff like this. Like you don't normally see 40-year-old guys dunking on people. Like that's just on a dunking on a super athletic 7-footer. Like at that, like you just don't see this stuff very often, and that's why I think we have to appreciate it a little more. And especially on the LeBron front, like I don't. Why I said I don't think we'll see another player in my lifetime or really ever. Like so many factors had to come into play for him to play this long. Like especially with the miles college players and high school players like coming up, put on their legs with AAU games. You could play 3 to 5 games in a day for a whole weekend or like over a tournament span. And just back in the day, they weren't playing as much. They weren't as like shooting and spacing expanded. You have to cover more ground. All of that adds up and it just puts more miles on your body. There's more and more training, more and more practice. That's also how guys are so skilled, and the skill gap continues to increase. But back to the point, I just think we have to not take these guys for granted. Like what they're doing is insane. And as far as the like Chris Middleton is regressing a little bit with age, Paul George is regressing a little hard, and it's normal. And like I said, I just think we were a little spoiled with Kevin Durant and LeBron and the top guys of this generation, and we just need to appreciate it while they're still here. But those are just my thoughts. So that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for tuning into the Peer Review Podcast. Please share the podcast with your friends and family, as well as follow us on X at peerreview_pod and on TikTok at Peer Review Podcast to stay up to date with our latest episodes and releases. This is the Peer Review, signing off.